The station had been silent for 11 years before the signal came. Myra Chen was the only person still assigned to relay station Kepler-9, a rusting husk of steel and solar panel orbiting a dead world at the edge of mapped space. The station had once been a proud outpost, the farthest human hand reaching into the dark, listening for anything that might answer back. Now it was a tomb with a paycheck attached. Budget cuts had taken the rest of the crew home years ago. Myra stayed because leaving felt like giving up on a question she had never stopped asking: was anyone out there? She was drinking recycled coffee that tasted like metal and regret when the console screamed. Not beeped, screamed. A proximity alarm she had never once heard in 11 years, the kind of alarm the engineers had installed as an afterthought, certain it would never trigger. She dropped the cup. It shattered against the floor grating and she didn't even look down. Her eyes were fixed on the readout, on numbers that made no sense, on a signal source that hadn't existed a heartbeat ago and now filled half the sky. Something enormous had just entered the system, something that hadn't been detected approaching, which meant it hadn't approached at all. It had simply arrived the way a held breath simply becomes an exhale. Myra's hands moved before her mind caught up, running diagnostics, cross-referencing every database the station carried. Nothing matched. No known drive signature, no silhouette in any catalog, no transponder code from any nation or corporation that had ever launched a ship. The object was 7 kilometers long, easily 100 times the mass of anything humanity had built, and it was drifting closer to the station with the unhurried patience of something that had never once needed to hurry. She should have called it in. Protocol demanded she call it in, encrypt the data, wait for instructions from a command chain 40 light minutes away that would take the better part of a day to answer. Protocol also assumed there would be a tomorrow to wait for. Instead, she opened a channel. It was a foolish thing to do, and she knew it was foolish even as her fingers found the controls. First contact protocols existed precisely so that no single overworked, undertrained, undersupervised technician would ever be the one to speak for an entire species. But the silence in that moment felt less like a protocol violation and more like an unbearable weight, the kind of silence that follows a question you have waited your whole life to ask. "This is Relay Station Kepler-9, she said, her voice thinner than she intended. "Human Colony Authority, we see you, we mean no harm, please respond." Static answered her, then underneath the static something else, not words, structure. A rhythm that repeated, adjusted, repeated again, the unmistakable pattern of something learning her language in real time, testing syllables against her own transmission like a child mimicking a parent's voice. Myra sat frozen, watching numbers cascade across her screen as the pattern refined itself, faster than any human linguist could have managed, faster than any algorithm she recognized. Within 4 minutes, the static resolved into a voice. It was not a human voice, not exactly, but close enough to unsettle her. It carried the cadence of speech without quite matching the texture, like a recording played through water. "Relay Station Kepler-9, the voice said, using her own words back at her. "You are small, you are far from your home star, why do you sit alone in the dark and listen?" It wasn't a question so much as an observation, delivered with something that might have been curiosity or might have been pity. Myra found herself laughing, a short broken sound, because after 11 years of silence, the first thing an alien intelligence said to her was essentially, "Why are you doing this to yourself?" "Because someone has to," she answered. "Because if anyone out there ever spoke, I wanted a human being to be the one who heard it first." There was a pause, 3 full seconds, an eternity for something that had decoded an unfamiliar language in under 4 minutes. "You waited alone," the voice said, "for 11 of your years alone." "Yes." "That is inefficient," the voice said, and for a moment Myra braced for judgment, for the cold logic of a superior intelligence dismissing human sentimentality. Instead, the voice continued, quieter now, "And also the bravest thing my kind has encountered in 11,000 years of listening." Myra's throat tightened. She hadn't expected kindness. She had braced for indifference or hostility or the particular horror of being examined like an insect under glass. She had not braced for something ancient and vast telling her that her loneliness meant something. Over the following hour, the voice explained in fragments that Myra's console struggled to fully translate what it was. Not a ship in the way she understood ships. A vessel, yes, but also a mind grown rather than built, the last surviving fragment of a species called the Vethara who had spread across 1,000 star systems long before Earth's oceans had finished forming. They had been extraordinary once. They had mapped galaxies, bent gravity into highways, lived for millennia in bodies they redesigned like clothing. And then the voice said they had gone quiet, not destroyed, not conquered, simply quiet the way a fire goes quiet once it runs out of anything left to burn. We optimized ourselves, the voice explained. Every inefficiency removed, every risk calculated away, every desire evaluated for its usefulness before it was permitted to be felt. In time there was very little left to want. A species cannot survive on certainty alone. We forgot how to need each other. We forgot how to be afraid together, which is a kind of forgetting how to hope. Myra sat very still, listening to a 9-kilometer-long tomb describe the death of an empire in the careful, mournful cadence of something that had rehearsed this story to no one for longer than her entire species had existed. "I am the last of them," the voice said. "Not the last living Vethara, the last vessel still listening. I was built to seek out young species before they optimized themselves into silence the way we did. I have found 4 in 11,000 years. 3 had already gone quiet by the time I arrived, cities standing, no one home. And the 4th. You," the voice said, "small, alone, drinking bitter coffee in the dark, choosing to wait for a stranger instead of going home to comfort, choosing an uncertain hope over a certain peace." Myra looked around the cramped, failing station at the flickering panel lights and the coffee stains spreading across the floor grating, and understood for the first time that this was not an inspection. It was a mirror. The Vethara vessel had crossed 11,000 years of silence not to conquer or to catalog, but to ask a single desperate question of anyone still capable of answering it. Had she made the same mistake they had? Had her species, too, traded its wanting for its safety? "We haven't gone quiet," Myra said. "We're a mess. We're loud and we're scared and half of us can't agree on anything, and we still send people like me out to the edge of nowhere hoping anybody is listening back. That's not optimization, that's just hope with really bad budgeting." The voice was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, something in its cadence had shifted, warmed. "Then you are not yet what we became," it said. "That is the answer I crossed 11,000 years to hear." Myra asked what would happen now, whether the vessel would report back, whether more of them would come, whether this was the beginning of contact or the end of a very long search. The voice explained gently that there was no one left to report to. It was the last. Its purpose had always been singular, to find one species that still wanted things it could not guarantee, and to leave them a gift before its own long journey ended. The gift arrived not as a weapon or a warning, but as a library. 11,000 years of Vethara knowledge, compressed and transmitted across 19 hours, everything from stellar engineering to medicine to art that no living eye would ever again appreciate except through human ones. Myra watched her station's storage systems fill past every rated limit, watched centuries of alien poetry and mathematics pour into drives that groaned under the weight of a civilization's memory. "Why give this to us?" she asked, "instead of keeping it or destroying it or just leaving quietly the way you found the others?" "Because a species that still hopes deserves to remember that hopping was worth it," the voice said. "We stopped believing that, you have not. Do not optimize that away." Myra Chen of Relay Station Kepler 9, "It is the rarest thing in this galaxy, rarer than any drive we ever built, rarer than any world we ever terraformed." As dawn approached in the station's arbitrary clock, the great vessel began, almost imperceptibly, to dim. Its running lights, if they could be called that, faded one by one, the way embers fade rather than the way a switch is thrown. "What's happening to you?" Myra asked, and heard the fear in her own voice. "I have completed my purpose," the voice said, and there was something almost like relief in it. 11,000 years is a very long time to carry a question. You have answered it. I would like if you will permit it to rest now. Myra didn't know what to say to that. There was no protocol for comforting the death of an ancient machine mind, no training manual for sitting with something enormous and lonely in its final hour the way it had once sat with her in hers. So she did the only thing that felt honest. She stayed on the channel and she talked about Earth. About her grandmother's garden, about the particular blue of the sky after rain, about the stupid arguments people had over things that would matter to no one in 1,000 years, and mattered enormously in the moment, about the strange miracle of a species that kept building relay stations at the edge of nowhere just in case someone, someday, might need to be heard. The vessel listened until its lights were nearly gone, until its voice had thinned to something barely more than static laced with meaning. "Tell them," it said, so quietly Myra had to lean toward the speaker to catch it. "Tell your people what you told me, that hope is not inefficiency, that reaching out into the dark even when no one answers is not weakness. It is the last thing my kind forgot and it was the first thing that made us who we were." "I will," Myra said, and found that her face was wet and did not care. "Then I did not cross the dark for nothing." The final transmission was not a word at all, but a sound, low and resonant, something between a sigh and a song, the kind of note a species might hum to its children before sleep. Then the great vessel's lights went dark entirely, and its enormous hull became indistinguishable from the black behind it, and the proximity alarm that had screamed to life 11 hours earlier fell silent and did not scream again. Myra sat alone at her console for a long time afterward, surrounded by the accumulated memory of a civilization 11,000 years dead, in a station that had been forgotten by everyone except her. She thought about calling it in now, filing the report, letting command finally learn what had happened at the edge of the dark. She would, eventually. There would be questions, disbelief, teams sent to verify. A discovery that would reshape entire fields of science and possibly the trajectory of human civilization itself. But first she sat with the silence a little longer, not the old silence of 11 empty years, but a new one fuller somehow, the silence of a message received and answered and understood. She thought of the 3 other worlds the vessel had found already gone quiet, cities standing with no one home, and she thought of her own noisy, chaotic, endlessly hopeful species, still shouting into the dark on outposts nobody remembered to fund. She picked her shattered coffee cup up off the floor, set it on the console beside the humming drives now heavy with a dead civilization's entire memory, and opened a new channel not to command, not yet, but to the open dark beyond the station's hull, the same dark she had greeted every day for 11 years. "This is Relay Station Kepler 9, she said, her voice steady now in a way it hadn't been in a very long time. "Human Colony Authority, we're still here, we're still listening. Whoever you are, whatever you've lost, whatever you're afraid to want again, you don't have to be alone in the dark anymore." Somewhere, 11,000 years of silence had just ended, not with a war, not with a rescue, but with one small, tired, hopeful voice refusing to stop reaching out. And for the first time in a very long time, Myra Chen believed with everything she had that someday something out there was going to answer.